Say it.
What are you doing?
Trying to get all the right buttons to push here. I couldn't get it to come up on. It wasn't giving me an option to get on Facebook.
Hey, y'all are lucky out there. You're gonna miss the storm. We saw Channel 11 weather. Y'all gonna miss it altogether.
Who is?
Columbus.
Me?
Yeah, you. You lucky dog.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they said Channel 11. We just saw the latest update. You're not gonna get anything, buddy.
Well,
We
okay.
are. We're right in the center of it.
Okay. Well, you
Don't
got your
call
life
us, we'll call
reservers?
you.
You got your life reservers?
It's like kind of like you said, I ain't scared.
Yeah. Yeah, we just got a call. My son has said from Texarkana said, well, as soon as the stuff goes through on Tuesday, we're heading your way. So they're going to come down for a few days, and that'll be good.
Well, that's nice.
They say it's gonna be. It'll be in Louisiana by Monday at 1:00 in the afternoon. Louisiana. That's how fast it's moving out of here.
Wow, it's moving very fast then.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I think I've got all the buttons pushed that I need to push here. Yes, okay. I think we're ready to go. So let me go ahead and mute everyone. And so now you're all muted, and if you wanted to say something, then you'll have to unmute yourself. And so I want to go ahead and welcome everyone here tonight, and we will try to finish off chapter 11, but if we don't, that's okay too. We'll just pick it up the next week. So anyway, for people that are joining us out on the internet that have never done this before, I'm Steve Sheik. I'm the congregation leader, rabbi at Tree of Life Messianic Congregation in Katy, Texas, and we are okay. I'll get the right glasses on now so I can use the computer. And so anyway, let's go ahead and we'll begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushaну b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. All right. And that blessing is, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. All right. Sometimes I forget to do the English parts. So tonight we are going to jump right into verse 20, and it took us 2 weeks to get through 1 through 19. It says, by faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, even concerning things to come. All right, so what we see here now is we're getting in the blessings, or the stories are about the patriarchs, and so we're going to do them for a little while, and then we'll get back to or get down into Moses. We'll do a lot of stuff with Moses, and then as the chapter progresses, we'll get into the after Moses and the end of the prophets and judges and the kings and stuff like that. So all right, so this very first part here, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, even concerning things to come. Now, where does that come off with faith? I mean, what kind of faith did he happen to have to bless Jacob and Esau? Because I mean, you look at it, and basically what he is, the faith that comes into play here is that Isaac was able to see the future for his two sons. And we know that the author of Hebrews here, he didn't get into any controversial things about Jacob being the deceiver and Esau being just a knucklehead. And so what Isaac is doing here, he's blessed. He was going to bless his firstborn, which would be Esau. And of course, we know the story in Genesis 27 and 27 about how that Jacob deceived his father, and the old guy must have been pretty far gone, because I mean, to put on goat skin around your arms and put on your brother's clothes and then try to talk like your brother. He didn't have all of his faculties there with him. Now, I do have to say that if it was me and my brother, we have deceived people before, not intentionally, but calling on the phone, and he and I sound so much alike that our wives sometimes have to say, "Huh? Which one? Which one are you?" And so I guess it could be that brothers could imitate each other. I know my brother's grandkids had a hard time one time when we got there. We're at the house, and we were talking, and his little grandson was just looking back between the two of us, looking, and he couldn't figure out, okay, these guys look alike and they talk alike, which one is Pawpaw? So it was kind of funny. But if you remember the story with Jacob, Rivka, Rebecca was told that the older one would serve the younger. So that would mean that Esau was going to be subservient to Jacob. And so I don't know, if she ever told Isaac that story or not, or if she just kind of kept it to herself, because Jacob was her favorite and Esau was Isaac's favorite, and so forth. So anyway, that's the story there. That's why there's faith involved, is because Isaac was able to bless the firstborn, and bless the one that got the blessing, which happened to be Jacob, and that was prophesied to Rivka at before birth. And so then when the deception was discovered, then Esau he's gone ballistic, and so his father comes up with another blessing for him. And as it turns out, both blessings have they're still coming to pass now, and Esau is still a problem in the world, and will be until the millennial period, I guess. So anyway, if anybody has any comments or questions on these things as we're going through them, just let me know. Okay. And then by faith, Jacob, as he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and he bowed in worship while leaning on the top of his staff. Okay, this is in reference to Jacob living, he was at this point, he had lived in Egypt for 17 years. It was a story that the audience of the book of Hebrews would have known. And so he didn't have to go into a great deal of detail on this one, but basically Jacob's faith allowed him, and the Lord, of course, allowed him to kind of see further into the future, to the future characteristics of his sons and how the tribes would play out the personalities of each one of them. And, he made some predictions that basically the tribe of Simeon would just kind of evaporate, which it did. And that, talked about Levi not having an inheritance, and then sure enough, that's what happened with that. So, but he did not want to be buried in Egypt. He says, "Take my bones back," and this is possibly in regard to the idea that he would have had a vision or premonition or a prophecy that all of his family was going to leave Egypt and go back home at some point. And then there's a kind of an interesting play on words here that I've looked at, that when in the Hebrew, the wording there, it says Rosh Hamitah, and that means head of the bed. And then the Greek, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but the Greek reads that on top of his staff. And the funny part about it is the Hebrew word for staff is mateh, and it's also mateh is also a word for I mean, it's spelled exactly the same consonants, the mem, tet, hey, and is the same as mitah or bed, and mateh can refer to the staff, like when in last week's Torah portion where Korah rebelled against Moses and Aaron, and they at the end they had all of the 12 tribes bring their staff and put it, the head of each tribe had to put his staff together, and they left it in the tabernacle overnight, and that staff was called mateh, and it's also the same word for tribe. So the mateh, the staff, and the mateh, the tribe, and so then this you can see where the difference, where it could be a little confusing, being the head of the bed or head on his head on the staff and so forth. So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting when I was reading through this, and then remembered that mateh is staff, and it's also tribe. And but Jacob was able to see off into the future some of the things, and he wanted to make sure that he was out of Egypt. Now, let's go to the next one. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, made mention of the exodus of Bnei Israel and gave instructions about his bones. Now, okay, Joseph, he was the dreamer. He was called the dreamer, a man of dreams, and he directly prophesied that the sons of Israel, the Bnei Israel, would leave Egypt, and so in preparation for that, or in just anticipation of that, I guess would be a better word, he told his brothers, he says, when you leave, not if you leave, but when you leave, take my bones with you and bury them back with my fathers, with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And so they did. They gathered up his bones, and so it would have been interesting in that the common practice of the Israelites, of the Middle Eastern folks out there, would be to take the bones and stick them in a cave, or in some kind of an enclosure, a mausoleum, something like that. Anyway, they would put them in a tomb, and then after a year or so, they would go back in and get the body and basically break up all of the bones and put them in an ossuary, which is a small box that is just long enough to hold the femur, which is the longest bone in the human body. And that's how they were then finally buried, in these smaller boxes. But Joseph, being a prince, a prince of Egypt in many ways, they would have embalmed him. And so it's kind of interesting that in there's a book it's a pseudepigrapha testament of Simeon, and it records a tradition of some Jewish communities that that of that first century, around the time the book of Hebrews was written, that the bones of Joseph would it was kept in the tomb of the kings, and since their wizards of Egypt had told them that if Joseph's bones leave here, then there's going to be darkness and gloom in the whole land, and a great plague on the Egyptians. So that it would be so dark that even with a lamp, no one would be able to see or recognize their own brothers. So it's interesting, just to consider, while being embalmed and buried by the Egyptians, Joseph seems to think of he foresaw a time in the future, and that he would be remembered again, and he wanted his body to depart from Egypt, and that it was also just it was a thing of faith for him, because he knew that they were going to leave. It wasn't if, it was when. When you leave, take my bones with you. And so, okay, now there was a chat thing here. Okay. You have no sound. Okay, Leonard, you have no sound. Everybody else can hear me, I guess, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right. So
Right.
I'm not really sure I know what to help you with there, Leonard, other than check your own speakers and see what go to your the what do you call that thing? The little settings thing down there, and then sound, and see if you punched a button, and or if you have a microphone, did you hit the microphone? Whatever. But yeah, most people can hear me here. So, all right, let's go ahead. Verse 23. Now we've gotten away from the patriarchs, and now we are to Moses, and there's going to be lots of things with Moses. It said, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw he was an extraordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's decree. Okay, this one, if you were going to be diagramming the Hebrew sentences here, you would see that, okay, that's a little confusing. By faith, Moses, when he was 3 years old, and of course, if you put it all in a proper grammatical structure and everything, it would, you're saying by faith Moses, when he was, no, is by faith the parents of Moses when he was. So the faith they're talking about here is the faith of the parents. And so we all know the story, how that the Pharaoh was so afraid of the Hebrew population that he said, okay, for the time being, that if there are any male children born, they are to be thrown in the river for crocodile food. And so it didn't work out very well because they said they were still having male children, and he went to the midwives and says, "Oh, why aren't you telling me about these male children? Why are you not doing something, throwing them in the river like I told you to do?" And they said, "Well, these Hebrew women, they're pretty strong, and so by the time we get there, find out about it, the boy is already born." And so evidently they didn't have a real good plan to deal with the euthanasia or getting rid of the baby boys after they were born. And so it was, they were good with abortion up to the 9th month there, but after the kid was born, then even that was kind of a difficult problem for the Egyptians. But anyway, something about it, Moses' parents looked at this baby and he says, "There's something different about him, and he's beautiful." And so they hid him away for 3 months, but after a while, in the close quarters of these little places where they lived, couldn't really hide that anymore. So now here to me is where the faith comes in, where Moses' mother had some faith. And I don't know if it was faith or if it was desperation or what, but to her to put that baby boy, 3 months old, and a 3-month-old baby boy, they're squirmers. They can do all sorts of stuff. Put them in this basket, and the basket had been put pitch on the outside of it, and so that it would float. And so she put it out into the Nile River. Now, they were up. Let me show you this next picture here. Okay. And this area up here, okay, this green area up in here, that was called the land of Goshen. And that's where the children of Israel lived. And so somewhere in here, and we don't know exactly where this was, but the mother of Moses put the child into a basket and then just put him out there in the river and let him go. And so and the Nile River is, it's not just a creek. I mean, that thing is massive. It's huge. And so we don't know. I know that Heliopolis was one a palace town, as it was. Tanis was also a place where the pharaohs had palaces and so forth. So it could be that somewhere along here between Heliopolis and Tanis and there, that she put the baby in the basket, knowing that maybe he would float by one of the palaces of the pharaoh's extended family. And so that's a lot of faith there, and I'm sure it was also born out of desperation that she would do something like that. So I know, just thinking about it in the natural, what would you do? Put your own kid out there and just say, "Okay, que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be." No, they had some faith to put the Moses out there. And all right, any comments or questions on that? Okay, so when by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Okay, Mike, you had a comment?
Yeah, let me ask you, when they put the Moses in the little boat, if you will, wasn't it real nearby where the Pharaoh's daughter was bathing, and that she saw him, and then retrieved him, and then raised him?
Yeah, I mean, you would assume that it was fairly close because Miriam kept watch as the thing floated down, as the little basket floated down river. And so that's why I'm saying that it was probably Heliopolis or maybe Tanis or something. That for some reason they were hoping, well, if we swinging by one of the Egyptian royalty, maybe they'll take pity on the boy and take him in or something. You know,
Yeah,
that was their thought.
Yeah, because I thought the Pharaoh's daughter plucked him out and then picked Moses' mother to raise him up, right?
Well, it was she plucked him out of the river, and then Miriam came up and says, "Hey, would you like me to find a Hebrew woman that can nurse the boy for you?" And she said, "Yes, do that." And so that's why she kept Moses then in her home until he was weaned. And back in those days, a lot of times they would not, wean them until their third birthday. So anyway, that's kind of what happened with that. Now, Warren, you had your mic open, but
well, I was thinking more about something that's coming up in the next part here, where it talks about that he chose rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. And to me, that it's kind of like that's a very challenging verse to me, as as a believer, because it means standing up when the people of God are suffering, and talking specifically here with with the Israelites, and I mean, if I need to be very mindful of my own heart and of my own walk, that my commitment to the Lord and to His plan is not just one of affinity for Jewish culture or messianic dance, but a natural standing up with and among the Jewish people into which I've been grafted into. We've been grafted. I mean, everybody's even Gentile believers have been grafted into that Commonwealth of Israel, and so there's a challenge there for the believer to I mean, faith really demands action. It's like we're looking at James, book of James, like if like I'm going to show, we need to show our faith, demonstrate our faith by our actual walk, so there has to be like there needs to be like a halakha, a way of walking, established in our own heart, that we are, am I really standing with the Jewish people? I've got Jewish friends. I've got an Israeli friend that I have over the house quite often, and I got and friends in Israel, but and there's a lot going on in Israel right now, and so I mean, it's just this section just speaks really to me that how deep is my commitment?
Right. Okay. All right. Good comments. And you're about I think that's verse 25 when we get to that. But here in 23, there are a couple of things there that I was looking at, that when it says grown up, the word that kind of ties to that was gadol, gadal, and that could also be translated, not, when you reach like an age of majority or something, but where you become great, where you become important. You're somebody at that point. And so that would seem to me to fit a little bit better with Moses here, because you gotta consider that Moses, by the time he had reached 40, he had spent 40 years in the palace, being educated in all manner of science and religion and philosophy and military things, and so great. Okay, I kept feeling something underneath my feet, and um, one of the dogs has brought in a dead bird, and it's sitting at my feet under my desk. So I'll have to take care of that after the class. So anyway, I don't want to get the joys of live broadcasting here. It's great. But Moses had, by this time, he was a general in the army. He had conquered Ethiopia, and so he knew some stuff, and he was somebody. But somewhere along the line, that there was still something within him that he knew that he was different, and that the Hebrews were part of his people. And you think back to it, if he was born into a Hebrew family on the 8th day, if they were observant, he would have been circumcised. And then if that be the case, then he would very well be different than the other Egyptian boys that would be within the palace. Although the Egyptians, they also practice a form of circumcision. I'm not sure it was exactly how it was, but if it was the same as that the Hebrews did or not. But for somewhere along the line, he knew that, okay, these are my people, and really and truly. And I think that's God's Holy Spirit was just kind of tugging at him a little bit. How that Yeshua said, "No man comes to the Father but except through him, and also except the Spirit draws him." And so anyhow, that's at this point, Moses has starting to make a decision and choose and doing different things. Okay, so when he had grown up, or when he'd gotten great, when he had become somebody real important, he decided to renounce his position in the palace of Pharaoh. And so he chose rather to identify with the people who were in slavery, and that he would do that rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a time. And a lifetime is still a time. And so anyway, that part of it is pretty much is fairly easy to explain. But then the verse 26, when it gets down to verse 26, and it says, "Considering the reproach of the Messiah greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he looked to the reward." Okay, now to me, that is a real conundrum, because how would he have known about the Messiah or anything like that? And so that's where this faith thing comes in. Somewhere along the line, the Lord had given Moses a view, a foretaste, shown him something about the Messiah. And remember, at this point, there's no written record of things within the Hebrew culture. Everything would have been orally transmitted, and Moses would not have been in the Hebrew home except maybe up until the time he was 3 years old and being weaned. And so that would not have been early enough for him to grasp this idea that I think the Hebrews, the Israelites, even back then, were looking for some kind of a Messiah, a redeemer, someone who is going to come in and save the people of Israel, God's chosen people. And so here it's saying by faith, when he'd gotten big and grown up and seen all that, he was going to he chose to go along with the Egyptians, with the Hebrews rather than the Egyptians, and because he was looking forward to something else, and he knew that he stayed in that Egyptian culture, he would not have been rewarded with the prize, which is much further, and that was then being with the Messiah. And so, and I think I think we need to read this. He considered the disgrace of Messiah's greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to the reward. He had some idea, and he knew because of that. It's kind of like Abraham when God told him, you're going to get up and move and go to the land I'm going to show you. Somehow, he appeared to Abraham, and Abraham believed. And here, I think he appeared to Moses, and Moses, in part, believed. He didn't have the full picture, but he chose to follow whatever was in his heart at that point, because somewhere along the line, he was very educated. He would have been educated into the religion of the Hebrew people, because they were a large population within Egypt. So he would have been able to look at some of it. All right,
Rabbi, you're talking about that Moses chose the reproach of God's people, and because he wanted to, considering the reproach of Christ, reproach of Messiah, greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. And so there's a parallel passage in Romans 15 where the believer is exhorted to help out and stand with those in their need, as the example of Yeshua, where it says where this is a Messianic verse. It says, "The reproaches of those who reproached you fell on me," which is out of Psalm 69. So it's that the whole idea. So he's accepting that very same reproach, the reproach of Christ, the reproach of Messiah. So also the interesting note too, that when we talk about he was put into this basket, the word there for that is teva, which is the exact same word which is used for the ark that Noah built. It was called a teva.
I had forgotten that. Yes. Yeah, good point. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. But it was for the saving of the body, of the soul, and then the things that Moses did. Of course, we'll get into it a little bit more, but he was bringing the people out of the slavery of of Egypt like the Messiah brought us out of the slavery of sin. So there are some parallels there. All right, so let's get on to number 27, or I won't finish tonight. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger, for he persevered as if seeing the one who is invisible. All right, so we know the story. Moses killed an Egyptian, and he was because he was beating up on a Hebrew guy, and so sure enough, the deed became very public. Because even though he looked around, didn't see anybody, they if he was out there in the fields or wherever it was, then that he was, and there was an Egyptian overseer beating up on a Hebrew guy, there would be people watching, and just because they knew Moses was a somebody and he was out there, and so they're going to watch him because they don't trust him. So Moses then fled to Midian. Now, there's one thing there. It says, by faith he left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king. And we'll go back to my translation. I'll use, not fearing the king's anger. And so there are some comments that they're saying, okay, well, this doesn't apply to because the Bible definitely says that he knew that he had been found out and he was afraid, and so he had some fear there. Now it may be just a question of semantics, because if he was really the prince, or the possibly even being the heir apparent in the palace, killing an Egyptian civil servant would not have been all that big a deal because of the divine right of kings and all that. But the reason that he had killed an Egyptian civil servant might have brought it might have made the Pharaoh very angry. And so but in Exodus it does say that he was afraid and he fled to Midian. And so here he's saying he left Egypt not fearing the wrath of the king. Well, one of the commentators, it may have been Ibn Ezra or Rashi, I can't remember, said, oh, well, what they're talking about there is when he came back after 40 years, he was not afraid to approach the king or the Pharaoh at that point. And I think that's kind of a stretch. These are some of the things that, okay, I'm not real sure about, but the writer he's a writer and he's trying to prove his points. And it goes on to say, by faith he kept the Passover and the smearing of the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch them. Okay, Mike, you had a comment there?
Yeah, let me ask you, in the book of Genesis heading into Exodus, I'm a little confused because in the Torah it says Moses fled after he killed the Egyptian, and the Jews saw him and said, are you going to kill us too? And then it said he fled into I guess the Midian, and yet in the book of Hebrews it implies that he didn't leave Egypt because of fear. Is there a contradiction there?
I think that's what I'm getting at here, is that I don't know that I can solve the problem, or the difference here, because in Exodus 3, I believe it is 2 or 3, it says that he feared, and then he left to go to Midian, and then the writer of the Hebrews says, well, he didn't really fear. It was at that point he was, or maybe at that point he did, but later on when he came back, he wasn't afraid of Pharaoh. I think, and I think it's now that I think about it, I think it's Clement in his first epistle, Clement 1, is the one that came up with that idea. So and I'm not sure that I would have would have gone along with that. The writer of Hebrews saying that that he was not fearful when the Bible clearly says that he was, and maybe he was fearful of losing his position, or maybe he was fearful, whatever. But yeah, it is it's a one of those words, and I'll use the same word I used before. It's a conundrum. It's just a something that I have not heard or seen a really good, hard and fast, ironclad explanation as to what that means. It's just there's a it's a problem, but trying to figure out, and I don't know if anybody else has got some of you Bible scholars out there, if you've got another idea on that as to what that may mean, why that in Exodus it says he was afraid, and then in Hebrews the author says he was not afraid. And I don't know, he may have been thinking of something else,
Well,
or something we're just not getting.
He had to exercise a certain amount of faith, going out into the middle of the desert, into the middle of like complete barren wilderness. The fact that he had no choice, even though he was perhaps somewhat fearful, but yet he was exercising faith that God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was going to see him through. And when he came back, of course, he did endure ill treatment. I mean, because remember when he from his own people, even, because he came back and went to Pharaoh. Pharaoh made it worse. It's okay. Now you're gonna make bricks with straw.
Exactly. All right. Okay. Mike, you got your hand up again? Yeah. Okay, Mike.
I accidentally pushed the wrong key with my focus right now, so I just
I got you.
So.
I got you. All right.
Wrong key. Huh.
Yes, Rabbi, this is Rich.
Hey, Rich.
Verse 27, by faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king. I kind of liken that to our own forsaking of sin, forsaking the world, the flesh, and the devil, not fearing the wrath of the devil, because now we have aligned our allegiance with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and we've come under his covering for provision and protection. And so I have forsaken modern day Egypt, so to speak, the world, the flesh, and the devil. I don't fear the devil. I don't fear the wrath of the devil, because I now belong to the King of Kings, and I've come under his covering.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of like what Moses probably likened his walk of faith, that he did not fear the wrath of Pharaoh. He left Egypt behind him. He took God's people out from Egypt, and he left Egypt behind him.
Yeah. Okay, but at this point, though, this is the beginning of his 40 years of exile in Midian. I'm not sure that I'm not sure how well developed his faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was at this point, and that's
right.
Just why I don't have a real good answer for that. I can see where you're coming from, and possibly that's where the author of Hebrews may have been also kind of coming from. And you're right in your analysis of your own life. And I can't reconcile what it says in Exodus and then what it says here in Hebrews there. I personally can't recognize.
So you're not sure if this is before he fled to Midian or after he came back from Midian.
Well, see, that's what Clement said, that this was when he came back after 40 years in Midian. He came back and he wasn't afraid of the king. But the structure of the sentencing there, he left by faith. He left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. would seem like it would be better. Says, okay, he left Egypt, but then when he came back later, not fearing the king's anger. So
Well, that'd be
like
interesting.
I can't reconcile them.
Right. It'd be interesting to look that up because the New King James has, by faith, he forsook Egypt rather than left Egypt.
Yeah.
When you read left Egypt, you're thinking of physically leaving, but forsaking Egypt has a bit of different connotation.
You're right. That's completely, and that may be the reconciliation of it. I just don't know.
Okay.
And that's why I say, when I don't know something, I'll just tell you I don't know, and I'm not going to make something up. So, let's go ahead. By faith, he kept the Passover and the smearing of the blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch him. Okay, here's another case of now. Moses has now become the leader over this year that he's in Egypt after he's returned. That he has been, become the de facto leader of the Israelite people, and God tells him to do this strange new thing that had never been done before, and it was to kill this lamb. And you have to go and get one that's and you keep it in your home for about 4 days, because you take it on the 10th of Nisan, and then on the 14th of Nisan you slaughter it, and that you eat that lamb, and just the ritual of it, you eat no unleavened bread and so forth, and then taking the blood and you smear it on your doorpost and over the top and stuff. I mean, that is really strange stuff, and yet Moses didn't question it. He just told the people, if you don't want death in your family, you're going to do this. And so, they did. The Jewish, the Hebrew people, the Israelite people, did that. And for the most part, the ones, if there were those that did not go along with it, didn't believe it, well, then they lost their firstborn. And there was no difference between them and the Egyptians or anyone else. If you didn't do that, you'd lose your firstborn. And so that's where, I said that God had seen, Moses had seen God in the burning bush. He had seen all the plagues. He'd seen all these things. All of these things built up to increasing his faith. And that's one of the things that I tell people when, at Tree of Life, where if I'm going to pray for them for healing, for a job, for this and that, whatever, then come back and tell me when God answers your prayer, because that's going to increase my faith. And just a couple of weeks ago, a lady says, I keep forgetting to tell you that, says, when you prayed for me and there was some immediate relief with my illness, says, but there was another one that was more long term, and it finally God healed me of that. And I just wanted to come and tell you, so that because you had asked us to always do that. Well, that increases my faith. Another guy, just again within the last 2 months, said, you remember, he was out of a job, he'd gotten kicked out of a job or whatever, and he was totally out of a job. He was wasn't even living paycheck to paycheck, because he was about 3 paychecks behind. And we prayed for him to get a job. Well, he got a job, and not only was it better than what he was getting, but then they said, well, we'll hire you on, and it's going to be like twice the money that he was making before. And then but you have to go to school for some stuff, and he did that. And then he so impressed them that they said, well, we'd like to make you a department head, really, before just bring you on as a department head. And he's making 6 figures now. And so, that, to me, that was that increases my faith. I wanted to really rejoice with him. And so all of these things that happened with Moses, they increase his faith. And so when it came to the Passover lamb, he says, look, I've already seen the plagues. I've seen the burning bush, all these things. Yeah, when God says to do this, I'm going to do it. And so going ahead by faith, they passed through the Red Sea as if on dry ground. When the Egyptians tried it, they were swallowed up. All right, again, here's another one. Moses' faith then at that point was Moses' faith when God says, okay, stretch out your staff at the ocean there at the Red Sea. And so Moses did it. Boom. And then the wind blew and the seas parted. And then can you imagine, though, the people, they're looking at this and they're looking back over their shoulders at the Egyptians that are up on the hill, but there's a big old cloud that God put there that they wouldn't go through. And they're looking at that, but the waves and it's just this canyon of water that's they're going to have to step through and go through. Well, then Moses' faith then was transferred to the people because there was one guy, he stepped out and then everybody else followed and they got all the way across and I'm sure it was scary. And it's a good thing back in those days that they didn't have iPhones because then it would have taken them a lot longer to get through with everybody taking a picture. Here's my, I know I make light of that, but it had to be scary. And so they had to have some faith, in crossing into that watery canyon there. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they were circled for 7 days. There again, this is one of those things where, okay, military leaders, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to parade around this city once a day, quietly, just march all the way around it. And then on the 7th day, we're going to march all the way around it 7 times, not just once. And then when you get to the end of it, we're going to blow our shofar, we're going to shout, and the walls are going to come tumbling down. And I'm sure that there were some in there that said, well, yeah, right. But the leadership said, no, we're going to do this. Joshua said, we're going to do it. They put the priests out there. They put the singers out there. They put the ark out there, and they marched around. And you can imagine the unbelievers within Jericho. They looked out at them and says, what in the world are they doing? And, ridiculing them. Well, it did not end well for Jericho that day, but Israel did their march by faith. And Rahab, the innkeeper or prostitute or whatever, she did not perish by faith. Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she welcomed the spies with shalom. All right. And also she knew enough that, okay, she protected them, and she knew somewhere she had seen what God was doing for the Israelite people. And back in those days, people looked at a people group. And if that people group was conquering, and if they were successful and they were doing well, then that must mean that their household gods were bigger than the household gods around the other surrounding areas. And so that's kind of possibly what she looked at and saw that, okay, Israelites' God is much, much bigger. I'm going to believe in him, because she already told the spies, look, the people's hearts are melting with fear of you. And so she put her faith and trust in that God, because she says he's bigger than our gods here in Jericho. And so that was, again, counted as faith for her. And so then we finally get to kind of a summation. It says, so what more shall I say? For time would fail me if I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, and David, and Samuel, and the prophets. And by faith they conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire. escaped the edge of the sword and made strong out of the weakness, and became mighty in war and made foreign armies flee. All right, so in this one, the author admits that, man, I don't have time to really go into everything that I would like to say here and tell you, but just mention these names. And Gideon, of course, at first Gideon was kind of a scaredy cat, and it took him a little time, but God was patient with him and put the fleece out, and it was dry on one side and wet on the other, and then he put it out again and wet on the one side and dry on the other, and so he built up his faith to the point that, okay, he gathered the army, and then God says, you got too many people, and I'm going to whittle it down to 300. And they went out there, and God miraculously gave them the victory, and Israel had peace for 40 years under Gideon. Barak was the head of the armies of Israel, and God told him to go up against Sisera, and he talked with Deborah, the judge, Deborah, and he says, well, I'm not going to go up there and do that unless you come with me. And so she says, all right, let's go. They went up there. God gave them the victory. And then there's Samson. Samson, he's kind of got a checkered record there. Sometimes he did well, sometimes he didn't do so well. But he listened to the voice of God when God told him go out and do this or whatever. And so it's an example of somebody having enough faith in God that, okay, he's going to wade into 1,000 Philistines with nothing but a jawbone of a donkey, and he's going to kill them all. Well, that's faith. And then you have Jephthah, who was an illegitimate son in the tribe of Gad, and so they were being overrun by the enemy, and so the people came to him and said, "You go and fight." And so he says, "Yes, I can do that." And he prayed to the Lord. The Lord gave him victory. Then, of course, you got David and Samuel, and they're just the stories of David. We could be here for another hour, but they went through there, and they conquered all these kingdoms and did all of these wonderful things. And so a lot of the things you would say, shut the mouths of lions. Well, he's talking about Daniel there, probably. Quench the power of fire. That's the three Hebrew men in the fiery furnace under Nebuchadnezzar. And just a lot of them escaped the edge of the sword, and a lot of them were strong, and they thought themselves weak, and so there a lot of that they were talking about the strong out of weakness, mighty in war. May have been talking about the Maccabees during that particular time. And so let's get a little bit further here. Women received their dead raised back to life, and others tortured after not accepting release so they might obtain a better resurrection. Others experienced a trial of mocking and scourging, yes, even chains and prison. They were stoned and they were sawed in two. They were murdered with the sword. They went around in sheepskins and goatskins. They were destitute, afflicted, mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered around in deserts and mountains and caves and holes in the ground. All right, so here there's multiple references that we could probably look at and say, okay, these are things that could be women receive their dead raised back to life. You remember the story with the Shunammite woman with Elijah, that he brought her son back to life. And then others were tortured under the guy in the Epiphanes, that in the Greek Antiochus Epiphanes, and where if people circumcised their sons, they were found out, he would disembowel the son and tie it onto the mother and make her, go around with her dead son wrapped around her neck. And other times he just tortured. He would cut open pregnant women, and it just is a horrible, horrible thing. But they didn't give in to becoming less than what God had for them. So there's a lot of other stories, mocking, the scourging. And so I think the author of Hebrews is maybe trying to prepare his people, his audience there, for what may be coming. The prophet saw it in two. That was Isaiah, and then the ones that were murdered with the sword. Jeremiah, I believe, was one. And so they went, and then they went around in sheepskins and goatskins. Okay, that again harks back to the Maccabean period, and so the world was not worthy of them. They wandered around in deserts and caves and mountains, and I went mountain climbing in Israel. Went into a cave where these guys were hiding from King Herod, of all things, and they were in these caves where you couldn't get to them at the time, and so the King Herod had them build a little platform that they could raise and lower. And when they went in there, then they shot fiery arrows into the caves, and they killed all of the people who were rebelling against King Herod. And those kinds of because they would not give up their faith in God. All right, so finally, and all these, though commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised, because God had provided something better for us, so that only with us would they reach perfection. So what's he talking about here? Well, what they're talking about here is that all of these examples of faith that they'd given to people, that he'd given to in this book, they were commended. God commended them. They said, I'm proud of you, but they all died without that complete picture. They all died not having the entire thing that God had promised. Well, what's that? And we're all in that same situation. We live by faith right now. We are living by faith. And because can you prove that God is that Yeshua, Jesus, is going to come back one of these days, and we're going to have a millennial period of 1,000 years? Can any one of you prove that? I don't think so. We just have to take it and go by faith. And that's what the writer here is saying, that all of these people, they died without receiving the full measure of what God had promised. And he's got something better for us. And then when that occurs, then that's when all those promises then will be perfected in us. And so anyway, I went 10 minutes over. I apologize for that, but we got through the chapter and the rest of the chapter, and I wanted to do that. Are there comments or questions that anyone might have? Okay, well, I guess I just talked too fast. All right, well, if that be the case, then I will just say Lila Tov, Shavua Tov. Have a great great week, and stay dry. Those of you in the south, on the Texas Gulf Coast, stay dry.
We're praying for you.
Have a great hurricane party.
There you go. Great hurricane party. I know yesterday, coming home from synagogue, we went by my daughter's house to drop off the computer that we used, and just as we got up to her subdivision, the bottom fell out of the sky. I mean, it just and so we said, well, we'll just sit here in the driveway, and then so I went the driveway, and it was asleep. And then my next thing you know, my granddaughter is